Welcome to the first of many Q&A talks. This monthly program is designed to connect parents and caregivers of LGBTQ youth with the resources they need and want that enable their children to live their authentic lives. This program series comes from the past 4 years of Project Q&A and the feedback that we have received from parents and caregivers of LGBTQ youth. It is evident that parents need and want resources to better help their children, and that's what Project Q&A aims to do. As society becomes more inclusive and interconnected, more and more young people are being empowered to live their authentic selves. Q&A Talks is the largest initiative to date Project Q&A has been working on, and we can't be more excited. We have been planning the launch of this series since early fall of last year. In late fall, early winter, the Independence Public Library approached us with an opportunity to collaborate on a grant, and Q&A Talks fit perfectly into the American Library Association's Transform Communities grant for rural and small libraries. Project Q&A is proud to be partnering with the Independence Public Library, which is a leader in providing diverse and inclusive classes and events while promoting equity within the community they serve. On behalf of Project Q&A, I would like to thank the Independence Public Library for all the work that they do in creating a more inclusive community. Q&A Talks is a bit of a different format than most web-based programs we have witnessed over the past year. The majority of tonight's program will be streamed live here on Facebook. Following the panel's discussion, we will have a 5-minute break to allow for individuals who have registered for the event to log on to Zoom and participate in a live Q&A session with the panel. If you have not registered for the Q&A session, the link will be in the comment section soon. Tonight's panel includes Jessica Mounts, who is the secretary of Gleason, Kansas, and the parent of 2 adult children. An already supportive ally of the LGBTQ community, she moved into direct advocacy when her youngest child began to observe and experience anti-LGBTQ bullying in middle school. Jessica is experienced in and a continual student of nonprofit and organizational leadership. An avid hunter, hiker, forager, and peddler, she envisions safe and equitable opportunities for all Kansans to spend time outdoors, leading to healthier families, happier lives, and more resilient communities. Our next panelist is Shannon Weiss, mother to 3 that identify in the LGBTQ plus community, currently a stay-at-home mom helping with online learning with her high school children. Our third panelist is Brock Landwehr, who is originally from a ranch outside of Independence, Kansas, and is the father of a transgender son who is currently in college. Brock also has 2 daughters, 2 stepdaughters, and lives with his wife, Amy, in Lawrence. And our final panelist is Alan Childers. We also have a special guest moderator, Cameron Cardwell, a sophomore at Independence High School. So we're going to start the panel off tonight by letting each panelist tell their story. And up first, we have Jessica.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jessica Mounts. My pronouns are she, her. And before I tell this story, I want to make it clear that I have my son's permission to share his story, because while there are parts of this story that are mine because I'm his mom, much of this is his story. And I think some of the answers or some of the stuff we'll talk about later, it'll kind of become clear why that's important. So all of that said, I am far from perfect. And when our son came out, I didn't handle it perfectly. And nobody will. Nobody does, because this is some pretty uncharted territory sometimes for us. So this is just a little bit about what happened when my son came out, and so and kind of what that led to and where he is now. So obviously I love my son. I'm really biased, but I think he's pretty awesome. And when he was about 13, he came out, and it wasn't probably all his choice to do so. He was experiencing some bullying in school, and it became enough of a problem that he had to tell me the details about the kind of bullying he was receiving, and it was it was anti-LGBTQ bullying, and pretty soon it became apparent why this was so harmful, or why he felt this took this so personally. But it really didn't become an issue or something that he was, adamant about taking action about, until he started noticing other people experiencing it at school. And one of my favorite stories of one of my favorite parts of this story is the day that I was working and I got a text from my son at about 10 a.m. and he said, "Mom, I have a meeting with the principal at 1 p.m. Can you be here?" And I thought, I didn't know it worked that way. I didn't know that a freshman could just call a meeting with the principal and invite his parents. So he invited his parents, and he also invited a good friend of mine, now a good friend of mine. But it was the first day I ever met her, Liz Hamer of Glisson, Kansas. And Liz and I and Aaron's dad sat across the table from a school administrator who told us, informed us that there wasn't a problem with bullying in that school, because he wasn't hearing about it. And we sat there and said, "There's a student here who's telling you that this is happening." So over the next few years, Aaron became more and more of an advocate for himself, and my role in that was simply to support him. I let him lead every effort. I let him plan to attend every school board meeting. I let him um, invite who he wanted to be there to support him in meetings with school administrators. And then I watched him one day stand on the steps of the Capitol and talk about why it was so important. He was a junior in high school, and he stood on the steps of the Capitol one day, and talked about in public why it was so important to be an advocate for LGBTQ students. Um, So from there, Aaron did not achieve his dream of establishing a inclusive club in his high school. It was never allowed. But he did experience many successes. Documented progress was made. The culture of the school is changing because of the work that was done by him and other students. Um, so the next natural course of action was for me to become an advocate myself. It really didn't have a choice. Just to support my son and all of the other kids out there who may not have the kind of support that I was able to give to my son. So all of that said, that's kind of our story. That's kind of why this is important to me and why I'm here tonight. And definitely not the hero of that story. The hero of that story is definitely my hero, my son Aaron. So thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Alan.
Hello, my name is Alan Childers. I work in Pittsburgh, Kansas, at one of the local school districts here. And my story doesn't begin as early back as Jessica's, and definitely Jessica, the amount of pride you must have felt watching him on the steps of the Capitol. I mean, that must have been amazing. And that's awesome. My daughter came out to me when she was 16. She's 19 now. And before that, I had felt, I guess I was kind of clueless. I know she had dated and had some crush on some boys in the past, but I didn't realize that there was this just growing awareness within her, or transitioning within her, that was taking place. And her, but when we went to, it's a funny story, because we went to Springfield, Missouri. There's a bookstore that we like to go to there, and we stopped for coffee at a cafe. And on the way to the cafe, well, the Pride Fest was going on. So, and this was before she came out to us. So she got to see us interact, and we had a great time. It was a fantastic Pride Fest. It was really fantastic, and we had a great time. And that gave her the courage enough to, you know, tell us about that later, and tell us, you know, that that she at first she told us she was bi, and later she came out that, you know, she was gay. And it was kind of like, I'm not really sure, she was sure of how I would react. And I've never a day in my life been disappointed in my daughter. And it was not that day either. And I don't think it has ever come. I just told her that, her sexuality was as fluid or as solid that as it needed to be for her. And, you know, wherever that took her, um, you know, that I would always be there for her and I will always love her. And so that is kind of my story. And, you know, where she's at now, she's just grown into this wonderful person who is connected with wonderful people in through her high school. She's out of high school now and she's working, but she's doing great. And yeah, that's where we're at. It's not. I know a lot of kids don't have that kind of, you know, the parent that sometimes, and you know, there's a lot of things that go into that, you know, both on the parent side and the kid side. And but on that day I can say definitely I was definitely in her corner, and I am grateful for that.
Thank you for sharing. Up next, we have Shannon.
Hello, I am Shannon. My pronouns are she and her. I am a mother to four, excuse me, 5 children. I have 2 stepchildren, and I have 3 children biologically mine. My oldest is Tegan, and he identifies as he and him, but is transgender. My middle child's named Jordan, and she identifies as bisexual. And my youngest child, Cameron, who's here, identifies as pansexual. So my journey kind of begins with them early on. With me growing up in the 90s, it was kind of hard to advocate, because then it was a new subject for everybody, and we were always taught. I come from a small town in Southwest Colorado that being gay was a bad thing. So, but being at the age where, you know, we're being exposed more to mainstream things that were coming to us, and MTV and so on and so forth. Viewing the LGBTQ community was more accepted among myself and some friends. And I decided there that I wouldn't make it a big issue for my children, my future children, to have pushback on my end. You know, I decided I wasn't going to be their first bully, because I had friends that were confident in me or confided in me and coming out to me. And I've had friends that have been kicked out of their family and who were homeless, and I kind of was their soft spot to land, you know. As far as my home life, it was touch and go. You know, I had a family that was accepting of family members or friends that were a part of the community, the LGBT community, but behind closed doors, we were told, you better not be gay or go down that path. It was okay for everybody else but myself and my siblings. But as we saw how toxic that was as I grew up and got away from home, I mean, it's great now, but I was prepared for myself in a way that if my children did come to me and identify as a part of the community, I would be okay with it. And lo and behold, it hit in 2015 when my oldest came to me one night, scared, and came out and said, "Mom, I have something to tell you." And working a full-time job, being in school at the same time, I was just like, oh, what is it? And they just kind of were taken aback by my snappiness, I guess you could say. And they said, "Hey, I'm gay." And they clearly nervous, clearly waiting and shaking. And I just saw the fear. And at that point in time, I was like, okay. And at that point in time, I've kind of had an idea that my child was identifying other than straight. So I just kind of like, well, okay. And my first question to them was, "Are you okay?" And they were just kind of like, "Oh, well, yeah." And I was like, "Okay, do you need anything from me? Is there something going on that made you come out?" And they said no, they just felt like there's their time to come out. And I said, "Okay, all right." I go, you know, I just, at that point in time, what I wanted to establish was reaffirming them that I still love them and that their place in our family wasn't going to change. At which point I was like, "Am I the only one you told?" "Yes." "Okay." And then I was like, "Do you want to tell your father?" At this point in time, my ex-husband, they transversed between two households, and it was no, I don't know, I don't want to do that. And of course, I'm like, well, I've known their father, a little bit longer than they had, and I was like, I think they'll be okay with it. You just have to be open with them. At which point, it did finally come out, and we had to be all on the same page, both sets of parents, to support our children. And that's the thing with when your children come out, it's evolving, because that laid the groundwork for my oldest to kind of like feel out how safe he was with us. Because about 2 weeks later, he came out and said, "Mom, I'm not gay, I'm transgender." There it was. I had a lot to deal with at that point because I knew how I would handle it if my child was gay, but transgender was something new to me. I was fully aware of it, but it didn't even occur to me that this would directly affect me in any way, but it did. So I kind of had to take a moment and like, okay, give me some time. Let me process this. At which point they were like, okay, but I made sure it's like, this doesn't change anything on how I feel about you. And they were like, okay. So we processed it. We got the support we needed. I reached out to the resources I had at hand with people I knew in my circle of friends and family who identified as transgender, along with others who identified as gay or lesbian. And we just went from there, made sure that they had access to the tools they had as far as being more confident in who they were and their identity. And then showing that my other two children eventually did have the safety they needed to come out to us in their own time. Just laying that soft place for them to land was very important to us, to make sure that they knew that they wouldn't have unwavering support from us, and that communication is key among everybody, because we're dealing with a lot of mental health issues and emotional and outside, perspectives. But we just made sure that they knew that they could always come to us no matter the situation. And our part had to be very open and very accepting of what was brought to us. And then if we didn't know or didn't have the answers, we helped guide them in a way to get the right answers for themselves or what they felt comfortable with. And so far, we've come a long way. We've had our ups and we've had our downs. But all in all, I think our kids are somewhat well adjusted and they know that they're safe in both homes to be who they need to truly be. And we've always made sure that a part of them coming out, they were going to have some resistance in the community at large. But to say that at this point in time, they hadn't had much pushback from the schools. A lot more acceptance at this time and age for them than it was, like in my time when I was in high school, which is I'm very grateful for because awareness is being brought to the issues at hand. Do they still sometimes get the occasional slur thrown at them, but they're so they have well ingrained to them that they have the support they need and they know that that's not who they are and that the love that we have for them sustains them among their family and friends. But it's one of the things we have to be sure is not to be our child's first bully is what we always decided on. And when we go out in public, we also show the community that we are also safe allies. Wearing our pride buttons or our kids being known among their friends is, oh, they're accepting, and being present in the schools, knowing that we're there to support our kids. They have the support they have at home, which makes it harder for others to dismiss them. So, but that's where we're at. I have 3 kids and they all identify somewhere on the spectrum with the LGBTQ plus, and that's pretty much our story in a nutshell.
Thank you for sharing that. Up next, we have Brock.
Hi. So I would definitely agree with Jessica that, nobody's going to do this perfect. Everybody's going to have their own little path. I had 3 daughters at one point, and I have 2 daughters and a son now. My middle kid was a little bit of a loner in school, really didn't socialize all that much. And early in high school, I started having some friends over, and I heard one of the friends call him by a different name, and my ears kind of perked up, and I said, after the friend left, I said, well, what was that about? And he said, oh, that's nothing. They just, call me that. And so a little bit after that, he said, Dad, I'd like to join the GSA. I said, well, okay. I said, do you know what that is? He said, well, yeah. I said, well, is that, somewhere you think you belong? And he said, yeah. So I said, all right, let's do it. And so we went down that path for probably 3 years, and I just, assumed my child was gay. And then one day, my wife and I got home from work, and I've got 2 stepdaughters, and then, my kids, and all of them were sitting on the couch holding hands, and they said, sit down. So we sat down, and Alex just sat there for a long time. And I said, buddy, whatever it is, it's fine. We love you. And he said, I am transgender. And so, of course, at that point, we were very supportive. My mind's kind of racing. And so we sought out, there was a friend of my wife's who has a transgender kid in school. A teacher friend of hers. So we sat down with him and talked for a while. And one thing that really stuck with me that he said, he was having trouble with his dad using pronouns correctly. It was always, she instead of he. And he said he finally sat down and said, Dad, this is your grandkid. If you want to hurt your grandchild every time you talk to them, you keep this up. And they're gonna break off relationships. And so that really, I've actually used that with different people, and it works pretty well. But it's been a journey, and since that time though, I've watched that kid just absolutely blossom. I mean, right now Alex is going to school for something he's always dreamed of. He's going to be a paleontologist. Surrounded by friends, just is extraordinarily. I'm just proud as can be of the kid. So it's a different journey for everybody, of course. But I think the lesson for all of us is, this is your kid. You're gonna love him, her, they, no matter what. So anyway, that's why I'm here.
Thank you all for sharing your stories. I know it's not always easy um, to be open and share. So now we've got some questions that we'll go through. And the first one is to, let's see. The first one's to Jessica. What do I do if I suspect my child identifies as LGBTQ plus?
Don't do what I did. Don't make them tell you. No matter whether you suspect your child may identify as part of the LGBTQ community or not, as a parent, your best parenting choice is to accept and love and support your kid for who they are and let them figure it out for themselves. Because no amount of telling or forcing or making your kid be something they're not is going to work.
Shannon, would you like to comment on this as well?
Sorry. Yeah, sure. Kind of on the same lines as what was said. You suspect or I mean, the one thing you can do to support your child. I mean, like I had said, planning a family. But as people right now are like, oh, I have my kid now, but I always knew for myself is like eventually I would probably have to deal with this in my everyday life, and it has, because it's being more prominent. But be open in your home. Like, they see and hear everything, like I said, like I had mentioned in my experience with my family is, they were loving and supportive to the outside, but when it became behind closed doors, it was a different story. Going in the opposite direction, like I'm always going to be open. So when the kids saw us as adults supporting the community, including members of the community and things we did, like outings and stuff, and supporting and being aware of the issues, because those particular issues affect people we care about. So we got to be their voice and ally. So with being that supportive, it made it that much easier for them to come to us in their own time. You can bring up conversations, but never in a sense kind of drawing them out directly, like bring up dialogue, like, how do you feel about this? Or what do you think what does this mean? Age appropriate stuff, of course, but as they get older, kind of show that you're open and you're talking. And I know some parents won't be accepting, or this is kind of dropped in their lap and they've probably said some things that are pretty hateful and not realizing it. And then, oh my goodness, it directly affects me. What do I do now? Because the first thing you do is like, I love my child. And like I've said these hurtful things. How do I correct that? Own up to it. Apologize for it. And then find the resources they need to help, to show your support, but don't be dismissive when they finally do. So, but in some instances where I've had other parents get, kind of have kids that were outed by other people is another thing too. And they know me, like, what do you do? And I was like, be supportive, first and foremost, You know, if it's against what you believe or how you're culturally brought up in the church, then you need to kind of stop and at least deconstruct some of that stuff. But, you know, but more than anything, it's just be open and make sure that the kid, your child, has safety as far as being able to express who they are. And if they somehow bring up the dialogue, be open, listen to what they're saying. I mean, it's okay to express your opinions too and how you feel about it, but both of you working together to kind of find some common ground is a big thing too.
Thank you. Alan, did you have anything to add to that?
As far as to which question, Brandon?
If you suspect that your child might identify as LGBTQ, what can you do?
Be present and listen. Be aware of their needs. Educate yourself. If you suspect and they have not come out again, if they have not come out to you yet, maybe just educate yourself without bringing it up, and wait. But also be aware if you see that they're experiencing pain or they're having bullying issues or things are going on, try to provide an open space for them to share with you how they're feeling.
Thank you all for sharing. This next question, we're going to start with Brock. How do you become comfortable with your child's sexuality or how they identify?
Well, so like whoever is watching this is a good first step. I like what Alan said, educating yourself. That's one of the first things I did because I was just not familiar with the terminology, with much about it. I mean, I had things firing off on my head like, are they going to be safe? Are they going to be bullied? Are there, what are the issues that come along with this? So you're really doing a good job educating yourself is the first step. And for me, again, seeking somebody out, that's one of the first things we did was, look for somebody who's been through this, who's walked down this path. And again, everybody's path is different, but that was a huge relief for me, just hearing about, somebody's kid who has been doing this for, 5 to 10 years. What does their life look like now? What were the struggles? What were the challenges? And then, I really just sat down and had a good heart-to-heart talk with my kid. I never want to do things that's gonna, hurt him or make him feel like I don't, I'm not on his side. So, there, that was the main part of it. Your kids are going to grow up to be who they are, not who you want them to be. And I kind of look at it like, if my dad decided that I should like circus peanuts, and every time I talked to him, he tried to get me to eat circus peanuts, I'd probably start, maybe pushing away, not going to his house as often because, damn, every time I talk to him, he tries to give me circus peanuts. So, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. You accept who your kid is and you love them. That's that's the gist of it.
Jessica, would you like to respond to how you become comfortable with your kids' sexuality or identity?
Sure. I think, you guys touched on it, Brock, you touched on it a little bit, but it's about, so in the rural community that I'm from, that I grew up in, and then I raised both of my children in, there just really wasn't a lot of diversity. And so we felt a lot of pressure to not only kind of expose ourselves to more diverse groups of people, but also to take intentional efforts for our son to participate in groups in a couple of larger adjacent communities that provided so that he didn't have to figure it out all by himself. That he had another group of folks to look to because we didn't have all the experiences and answers. And then in the meantime, that we worked on learning stuff ourselves, learning as much as we could.
So thank you. This next question is for Alan and Shannon. So whoever wants to go first, how can you advocate for your child in their school?
How can you advocate for your child and your school?
Yes.
By researching for me, you research what options your school has available and your community resources. And if those resources aren't there, you try to make them. You try to find where in the country that those resources do exist, and you try to emulate that where you're at, and you find those answers the best that you can.
Shannon, would you like to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. Very involved with the kids at school. They are in all kinds of extracurricular activities. We know who they surround themselves with, friends, and they want to involve to a point. They feel like they can handle it, and being sure that they know that if they ever need a stronger voice to stand behind them, that we're there. We're all for if you want to see change, be that change. So within school, we've asked them, have you come across any adversity? Have you had anybody kind of bully you for? Because their friends knew before we did, or before they came out to us. They usually surround themselves with pretty good group of friends, and we're like, we support you. That's what's amazing about today in school, is how a lot of the kids are more accepting and more vigilant for their friends that identify in that community. But just kind of adding on to that, yes, make sure you know the policies of the school. Make sure that you're there and present, and that you are a very involved parent. It makes it harder for them to kind of dismiss things, or we'll deal with it tomorrow. Today's issues will be tomorrow's problems, kind of deal. When our son came out as transgender, we were like, okay, we can process this. Eventually, we're going to have to let the school know. Living in the rural area, especially in Kansas right now, with the laws where they're at as far as transgender youth using the bathrooms, is a big issue. My son, bit of brave soul, he shotgunned an email out to all his teachers before he actually told us. And a lot of them, great support, like, good job, congratulations, and whatever you need, let us know. And we got a call from the school say, can we have a meeting? And we were like, okay. So we all went there as parents and with our child, and the administration was, we are going to do what we can to support Tegan in him being who he is in our school. We will be sure to squash any kind of bullying that comes up. He needs to tell us. And as far as the restroom concerns, they say, unfortunately, with the laws, we can't provide him the ability to go to a men's restroom, but we will be sure to make the faculty restrooms available to him. So they were creating safe spaces for our child before we could actually voice any kind of opinion or concerns, which was really great for us. And they know how involved we are with our children, so they knew that they couldn't get away with a lot. And not only that, being advocates for other children in the school system, because there's just not my son who's transgender. It's the one that actually kind of put a voice and a face to it. And there's plenty other kids that are in the school right now, and they do get the support they need. And They do have some in there that kind of push back against it, but there's a lot more of them than is there, more support for them. So, but as far as the parents, I just say, hey, whenever you need to tag me in or any of your parents, let us know, we'll be there. But they seem to handle it genuinely well on their own, finding their own voice and being able to stand up.
Thank you. Jessica, would you like to add anything to that?
You know, Shannon has a really wonderful way of saying exactly what I'm thinking. So I'm going to let her voice, I'm just going to echo it. Thank you.
So in lieu of time, we've got one more question I'm going to pose to all the panelists. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. And thank you for the panelists for sharing your stories and being a light for other parents. So before we go with this last question, I just want to remind the audience to be sure to, if you haven't already, registered so you can get the Zoom link. We'll have about a 5-minute break after this last question for individuals to log on to Zoom and ask the panel questions. But this last question is, what is one thing that you can do to support your child? There's just one thing that you could do, what would that be? Brock, would you like to go first?
Sure. You know, it sounds simple, but, you know, just accept your kid and love who they are. You know, again, nothing's going to change the fact that they're your kid. You know, when my kid came out, it didn't change a thing about how I felt about my child. You know, I think it was Shannon was right about, you know, growing up in the 90s. I didn't know anything about this. There are not more LGBTQ kids now. It's just that they're coming out now. And so, you know, if you educate yourself and you know, just accept your kid and love who they are, everything else is going to follow. You know, you'll find yourself becoming an advocate and becoming, you know, all these support mechanisms for the kid just out of, you know, out of love. So.
Would anybody else like to share one thing that parents can do to show support for their kids?
Oh, sorry, Shannon, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna, like, I definitely know what I would do, but I kind of want the actual source here to say it. She would like to say something. So here's my daughter, Cameron.
Hi. So when it comes to supporting your own children in a way, what we want is probably not going to match up with what you want at the same time too, you know? Expectations can't be met all the time, and of course, you're going to have some, like, you know, a little bit of pushback from your kid, like if you want to be supportive, you know, if they think you're overly supportive, things like that. But it comes in so many different forms of the ways you can show your support towards your kid. One of the simpler things that you can do is just rethink your opinion on who your child is as a person. They're still a child that you love and you raised, but at the same time, having this new piece of information about them makes things a little different. And so whatever, you know, past judgments and opinions you have on your child, rethink them and, you know, kind of like gloss over, like, what does this mean? Like, what is the ways that I can support my child, you know, now that I know that they're this person and that they identify as part of the community. If you are already, you know, very open, you don't have many like things that you need to rethink with your child, do a little bit like more grand gestures with them. You know, you could always like buy them their first pride flag, get them like that binder that they need. And if they want to change their name, help them look for that perfect name for them. It's all about making it about your kid at this time, because that's the one thing they need for support, is that you need to be there for them.
Thank you, Cameron. Anybody else like to add to those statements?
One of the for supporting your children is that their perception of themselves is expanding and their awareness of themselves is expanding. And when they come out to you, you're going to be playing catch up really quick. Your perception of themselves and yourself are going to be, because it is impossible for it's impossible for me anyway, to divorce myself from thinking that how intrinsically connected I am to my kid. She is a reflection of me. I see myself in her every time I look at her. So when she comes out to me, my perception of not only her but myself expanded as well in a relatively short period of time. So just be open to that, and don't. Sometimes our knee-jerk reaction is to, fear can often sound like anger, but definitely give them all the support that they need. Grand gestures, like she was saying, like sorry, was they're saying that I remember walking down in Joplin and going with my daughter to her, like actually going and being involved in Pride and walking with her down our first Pride Fest. And that was just the sheer joy on her face was the most happiest thing I've ever seen. And it filled my heart with joy. So don't be afraid to expand your awareness and of that to support your child.
Thank you. Jessica?
I don't have a lot to add that hasn't already been said, but don't be afraid to ask them what support looks like to them. Shannon said being willing to tag in when things got too hard, and I fully agree with that. That if your child knows that no matter what, they've always got a safety net, they've always got backup. They're going to be a lot braver themselves, and they'll learn a lot more, and become more fully themselves with your support. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, once again, I would like to thank all of our panelists. And if you would like to join us for the live Q&A session on Zoom, please follow the registration link in the comment section on Facebook to register and get that Zoom link. If you are unable to attend, we do have a link in the comments for an exit survey. If you could fill that out and provide some feedback for us. Each month, we're going to be having a different theme for our Q&A talks, and that's going to be based on the participants' feedbacks, because we want this program to be the most beneficial for parents. And so your feedback will help us shape our future programs. Our next Q&A talk will be on May 19th. And that's going to feature a panel of LGBTQ youth who are, in their early 20s. And we're going to hear from their side of the story. And so as we get more feedback from the viewers that are watching this, we will be able to get more professionals and other individuals in here and gear these programs specifically to the needs of the community that we serve. One last thing before we go into our private Q&A session on Zoom. Tomorrow night, you're welcome to join us for a screening of the film Fire and Flood, Queer Resilience in an Era of Climate Change. We will have a screening of that documentary starting at 6:30 on Zoom. And following that screening, we're really excited to have one of the activists featured in the documentary come and talk with us. And that's tomorrow night, April 22nd at 6:30 p.m. You can register for that on our Facebook page as well. So we're going to take about a 5-minute break and to allow people to log into Zoom, and we'll thank you all for joining us. And thank you to our wonderful panel for taking the time to talk to you all tonight.